Hey, right, a little bit of political motoring news, if that's what you want to call it. I've actually had quite a few people contacting me, asking me why I haven't commented on recent developments here in the UK. And there are two reasons, really. One is I've been busy with other things, motorcycle content, and the other is obviously we've had some major developments in the UK with the recent elections. We now have a new government in place, which it was probably worst case scenario for motorists in this country. And I was waiting for some developments before passing on my thoughts or opinions. And let's be clear, that's all this is. It's just my thoughts and opinions. Now, before we get into this, my partner Paula, as you know, started up a new channel a few weeks ago, Urban Botanical. I've had a few people asking me in the comments section for a link to it because they started watching it but now they can't find it. It's only a small channel, so that's understandable. I'll leave a link in the video description down below. I think she is actually putting a video up today. So that's just for those that are interested in that. Now, about a year ago, I warned that it was very, very likely that a Labour government was going to get into power here in the UK come the next general election. Rishi Sunak decided to play poker and announced a snap election which took place at the beginning of this month. And the Conservative government got obliterated at the polls. Now, this was mainly a demonstration vote by the UK public, a rebuke, if you like, towards the Conservative government to sort of let them know that people really weren't happy with the state that they'd got this country into. And in a way, quite rightly so. The problem is a lot of people voted for Labour. Well, actually, no, they didn't. I think, if I remember rightly, Labour have got into power with what they call a landslide victory, but actually they got less votes than they got at the last election when they lost. It was a very poor turnout at the polling stations, and only about 18 or 20% of the UK public actually voted for them. As far as a mandate from the public is concerned, they didn't exactly get a majority. It was an installation by default more than anything else, because the Conservatives are just not in the running anymore. Now, our new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is a self-proclaimed working-class man, not because he's ever had a working-class job, but because his dad was a toolmaker, apparently. He's led a life of luxury and privilege. He's a self-proclaimed socialist, and he made it very clear prior to him being elected as Prime Minister that, as far as he was concerned, after 6 p.m. on a Friday evening, his family came first and he would not be working, come what may. And so, if that's to be believed, if we have any sort of major national security issues crop up on a weekend, this country is stuffed. Really, I think this was a very naive thing for him to say. Obviously, if something drastic did happen, he would have to get his finger out and work. It does sort of inform you quite clearly of the self-obsessed, unrealistic bubble that he lives in. But I do think the biggest danger with Keir Starmer is that he is a net zero zealot. He doesn't think that the previous government went hard enough or fast enough with net zero, and I think he's going to address that. And I think the biggest worry with this guy is that his allegiance is not to Westminster and the public that he serves. He's a World Economic Forum puppet. In fact, at the last Davos meeting, Davos has become quite controversial with the voting public all over the world in the last year or so. Most countries' leaders avoided it like the plague, but Keir Starmer made a big point of attending it himself and criticising everyone else that didn't turn up. And when recently Sky News interviewed him about who his allegiance was to, Westminster or the WEF, he said this.
ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Keir Starmer is a globalist. He doesn't apparently believe in the sovereignty of individual countries. He believes in globalisation and the teachings of the WEF.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained, and it's closed, and we're not having meaning. Once you get out of Westminster, whether it's Davos or anywhere else, you actually engage with people that you can see working with in the future. Westminster is just a tribal shouting place.
So they have it right from the horse's mouth. Keir Starmer just considers Westminster, the seat of British democracy, as just a tribal shouting place. But when you think about it, that's what democracy is. It's different tribes voting until the majority gets the vote and gets the decisions made. He doesn't want that. The tribal shoutiness of democracy gets in the way of what he wants to do. And he much prefers the comfort of Davos, where the unelected elite gather and just make decisions for us. For our own good, because we're too stupid to vote for the right thing. Which brings us back to net zero. Last year, Rishi Sunak, I think it was last November, might have been September, stood up and told the country that he was dialing back the net zero policies regarding the sale of petrol motor vehicles, which was scheduled to end in 2030. He moved it back to 2035, in line with Europe and most other Western countries. Now, within an hour, Keir Starmer said that if he got into power, he would immediately reintroduce that 2030 deadline. And that's why I've been waiting to make this video, because I've been waiting for an announcement that that is going to go ahead. Now, I remember when I produced a video on Rishi Sunak dialing back on the ICE petrol ban, quite a few people jumped into the comments section to sort of tell me that this was just populist politics, and I heard that being described as that elsewhere as well. But, populism is a word invented really by the wealthy elite. Politicians creating policy that is popular with the voters. Popular because they make the voters' lives better, or easier, or more affordable. But actually, the term populism is used as a derogatory term. It's used as a feckless policy designed to appease a stupid, ignorant voter and get him on side, when really you should be doing something else that he's not going to like. Now, we had the King's speech last week, and there was no mention of the ICE ban moving back to 2030. There's been no word from Keir Starmer that it's going to be moved back to 2030, and it sort of left me wondering what was going on, because I can't imagine for a moment that Keir Starmer is not going to do what he said he was going to do. But then 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, if you're watching this video on Friday morning, the Department for Transport apparently announced that this change in dates from 2035 to 2030 is going ahead, which I think confused the mainstream media somewhat. Now, quite a few outlets have reached out to the Department of Transport for further comment on this, but they've not been forthcoming with any further information. Of course, we've got the fact it wasn't mentioned in the King's speech. Keir Starmer hasn't mentioned it in any other of his little speeches that he's made. Why is that? Well, I think it's because the current new government has realised that actually their tenure is not as stable as they would like it to be. And I think with various other things that are going on with immigration, energy security and everything else, there's a good possibility that they realise they're going to get into serious trouble within the next year or 18 months. So although I've got no doubt that Keir Starmer is behind this change in policy for the end of the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles, he's taken the cowardly way out. He's chosen to distance himself from it and allow the Department for Transport instead to initiate the news. But one thing's for certain, the 2030 ban is going to come back in force. Now, I warned over a year ago that if Starmer got into power, this policy would go faster and harder than we'd seen it so far. And so far, only cars have been mentioned, not vans, so we don't know whether the ban on the sale of petrol and diesel vans is going to be brought forward from 2035 to 2030. It might just be that whoever made the announcement hadn't thought it through properly and just assumed, only car drivers are going to be affected. Brings us to the subject of motorcyclists as well, because, they're not going to be left out. Without a doubt, motorcycles are going to be affected in some way, because as I've said, Starmer's brief going forward is to go harder and faster on net zero policies, and without a doubt, motorcycles are going to be dragged into that. And we definitely have a situation at the moment where the sale of electric cars has stagnated. In fact, it's only been kept afloat largely by fleet sales. That's businesses and companies buying them in for their employees to use, because there are certain tax incentives that encourage them to do that. But private sales are sliding, and so are the sales of electric vans, which might be why it's been left out, although it might just be an oversight on the original announcement. I mean, I get regular comments from viewers who work for companies that have adopted electric vans, and from what I can gather, the average working day starts at 8 o'clock in the morning and finishes at 10 o'clock because the batteries are flat and they have to get the van back for recharging, which takes some time. Electric vans, it would appear, are not very practical. And I seem to remember seeing something about Fiat abandoning electric cars this week because nobody wants them. Anyway, that's the only update I have on this so far. Rest assured, when we hear more, I will be back on it. So until then, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. You can show your appreciation by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, or you can thank me via the super thanks button or via my Patreon page. Either way, it's much appreciated. I am of course going to be back next week with some news, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.